Calling the meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please. Mr. Pratt?
Here.
Mrs. Bird? Here. Mr. Holmes?
Here.
Mrs. Powers? Here. Mr. Christopher?
Here.
Please move Dr. Merriman and Mr. All right, I need a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Motion.
Mr. Pratt, second. Ms. Bird, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Up next, Dr. Myers.
Okay, thank you. First item tonight under presentations is, this is one of our favorite parts of the year where we get to have the Fort Zumwalt Special Olympics Golf Committee come in and share their donations that they raised for their annual golf tournament to benefit Fort Zumwalt Special Olympics. So for tonight, we have two representatives with us, multiple representatives, but two that will speak. So first, Diane Papageorge is the Fort Zumwalt Special Olympics Golf Chair, and then also with us is Deborah Stolarski, Fort Zumwalt Special Olympics Coordinator. And Diane, if you want to come up with Deborah and introduce and kind of take us from there, that would be great.
Okay. Hi. My other committee members that are here is Keith Jennings and Paul Becker and JB Met. You guys can come on up too. And then, do you want to bring your team up here too?
Sure. If I can bring the crew up, that would be awesome.
Sure. Come on.
I have with us some basketball players, softball players. Some of them do track and field, some of them do soccer. So it's a fun crew.
Wonderful.
You guys want to kind of just stand up here?
Well, we were real excited to have a very successful tournament again this year, and we raised $7,000. So we're real excited about that. So that we can buy some more uniforms for you guys.
Yes.
How's that?
Yes, we use it for uniforms, and Special Olympics Missouri charges fees for the state competition, so that helps offset the fees for our athletes, so that's great.
Wonderful.
And we're actually expanding. We have so many people interested in softball now that we're going to have at least another team this coming summer. So we have one now. We'll have enough for at least 2 or 3 teams total this summer. So we're going to be putting this to good use.
Yay,
So
very
thank
good,
you.
very
Thank you so
good.
much.
And I encourage everybody, of course, around spring break, I send out the flyer for the tournament. It's always the second Friday of June at Incline. And I sell out fast, so, so I encourage you to come.
All right, guys, let's get everybody in front
All
of
right,
this
we're going to take a
podium here.
picture, guys. Let's move up a little bit.
Let's move on. Are you going to be in the picture? Here we go.
Everybody.
All right. Gotcha. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again, everyone. Next item is another presentation, and Brian Whittle, our CFO, is going to walk us through. This is our annual district audit and publication of our financial statement that then gets submitted by December 30th up to the state. So Brian, if you want to take us through and do introductions, that'd be great.
Sure. So our auditor here is Nick from Clifton Larson Allen. We had another clean audit. The page you have to sign, if you look at the audit report itself, it's page 9. That also matches the front page of the ASBR, just if, you're wondering how the numbers flow through. So there's a direct line between the monthly financials you get from us, the state ASBR, and then the audit report that he's doing now. So don't want to take away his thunder. I'll let him discuss it.
All right. My name's Nick Torito. I presented last year as well. The senior in charge for the audit. And like Brian said, I'm here to present the FY24 audit results. I don't need anything on the board, so if I can get going until it pulls up. But essentially, I'm just going to go over the audit approach and our risks associated, go over our executive summary, the opinions that we issued, major federal programs we tested, and then our required communication. I'll try to make it as pain-free as possible. I know it is very dry, but I'll try and just kind of give you a little insight on what we do and how we combat the risks that we identify. So there's a number of risks. There's our audit risk, our inherent risks, control risks, and detection risks. The audit risks are what is the risk that there is a material misstatement due to fraud or error. We combat that with performing preliminary analytics off the bat to identify significant audit areas, whether that be due to balance or unusual transactions. We address that initially so that we have a good audit plan going into when we have year-end numbers. There are inherent risks in all audits. There are required minimum two that you'll see in every audit. One is management override of controls, and the other is revenue recognition. The override of controls is essentially management in the end could sidestep a control that's in place, and we try to address that and look for things and do tests to make sure that that is not happening. So we do journal entry testing, and we do a number of other things related to that. And then the revenue recognition, obviously, we want revenue reported in the appropriate period that it should be reported in. It's a cash-based district, so once the money is received, that's when it is recorded. So it's pretty straightforward. There are some categories within the revenue: tax revenue, non-exchange revenue, and exchange revenue. Tax revenue obviously is a large number. We confirm that with the counties. And then the non-exchange revenue, we confirm that with the state. So we do a lot of third-party confirmations through that, which mitigates the risk as well. There are control risks. What's the risk that the control implemented does not work or detect an issue, fraud, misstatement, error? Doesn't always have to be fraud, it can just be a harmless error, but what's the risk that it's not detected? So we review the controls that are in place. We do internal control walkthroughs to make sure that if a control is designed and implemented, that it is working appropriately and that it is being adhered to. And then detection risk. What's the risk that our audit procedures will not catch material misstatement due to fraud or error. So we implement new tests annually to avoid familiarity. We have a long history with the district, working relationship, and so that is a great thing, but it can lead to complacency. So we try to implement some unpredictability there to avoid that. And then we also rely heavily on data analytics, year-over-year fluctuations, monthly fluctuations. We look for any unusual transactions that may occur within the year, and then also inquiries with management to kind of up front, just to make sure we know what to expect when we look at that information. And then all of that, you might say, wow, that's a lot to look at. We also take a risk-based approach. So once we've made our initial risk assessment, we then will focus on the riskier areas, or more of our attention will be geared towards riskier areas and less attention to, say, a low-risk area. For instance, revenue is a high-risk area, so we'll focus a lot of our time on that. Change in fund balance would be a low-risk area. That's just current year activity, so we're not going to focus a lot of time on that. As long as that works, we can move on from that area. The scopes of our service, we do provide, there are 4 letters within the audit itself. The opinion on the financial statements, as you can expect, just your financial statement summary of the district. The examination report as it relates to the state's compliance requirements, the district's requirements with the state attendance, transportation, budgetary. We have an independent auditor's report on our government auditing standards, and then an auditor's report on compliance and requirements as it relates to major federal programs, single audit, your federal awards. We did test 2 programs this year, which is pretty historically, it's usually 1 or 2. Special Education Cluster and the Education Stabilization Fund, so your ESSER dollars were tested this year again, which potentially will be the last year we have to test that. My guess is, even though you had funds, I think that ran into FY25, that the last several years it has carried a higher risk category, so we've been required to test it annually. No, they will not have that going forward, so that probably will not have to be tested on the back end. As it relates to those 4 reports, the district did, like Brian mentioned, the district did receive unmodified opinions. That's a clean audit opinion, best you can get. I'll go over in a little bit, but we also didn't identify any significant deficiencies, material weaknesses, anything of that nature that would require more, kind of follow up and making sure that the district is kind of rectifying those after the fact. We do have other required communications. No material uncertainties as it relates to the district's, ongoing, the longevity of it. We call it a going concern. There's no issues there. No disagreements with management, no difficulties encountered during the audit. Obviously, we've had a history with Jeff Orr. He retired. Been a pleasure to work with Brian, get familiar with him, and obviously continue to work with Janice. So both of them were spearheading our numerous audit requests. No corrected misstatements identified. We did identify 1 uncorrected misstatement, which is related to the timing of subsequent payroll payments. No change within the district, nothing changed. It just has to do with the district reporting the payroll amounts related to the FY24 contract in the FY24 calendar year. There's a little blurb in the financial statements as well that indicate that exact thing, and that it is consistently applied by the district as well as most districts within the state. So there's nothing that's going to come from that. There's nothing that the district has to do, but our quality reviewer just was hung up on it, so we had to kind of include that in our report. No fraud or illegal activities identified. No new accounting standards were implemented, and then no prior year audit findings that we had to respond to. No non-compliance as it relates to the federal awards, and no, like I mentioned, no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. So again, I appreciate the relationship that we have with the district, the opportunity for us to serve you, and I thank you for letting me present here tonight. So any questions that you guys have? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
A lot of work.
I need a motion to approve the 2023-2024 district audit and publication of financial statements as submitted. Mr. Christopher, second. Mr. Helms, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Next, we have comments from the public. I remind you to please keep it 3 minutes or under. Mr. Dinoff?
Yeah, look into that, because that might be new, so if that's the case, then we'll get that.
Good evening, members of the Board of Education. My name is Arnie C. A.C. Dinoff, candidate for the Board of Education and District Public Advocate. First of all, I think there needs to be more of a dialogue between the Board of Education and the public. It seems like the board president wants to get through the 3 minutes as fast as she possibly can without getting to the crux of issues that are facing the district. And I think that's a tragedy. And I think that needs to be looked at by all 7 Board of Education members. To the parents, to the family, and to the community, we deserve answers on the bus accident. It's been now, a month and a half, probably longer. I'd have to look back at the weeks. But there's been mum from district officials, mum from the O'Fallon Police Department, and mum from DESE/the Missouri Highway Patrol, which is in charge of bus safety. There needs to be a public report by the school district to the community, by the O'Fallon Police to the community, and by the Missouri State Highway Patrol to the community. There shall be, and I will work hard to make sure that there are no secrets and no stones that have not been unturned in this investigation. I think it's a tragedy. My heart goes out to the family. but there needs to be accountability and responsibility of this school district. There's a liability issue, a court lawsuit is coming. A similar case in Florida, the jury gave to each parent, they were a divorced family unfortunately, but the jury paid out $156 million per parent for a similar incident in Florida. Then when it comes to the North High School change order ratification, I don't know who's doing their job around here when you're making $150,000 as administrators, but the $20,000 change order, it's an error in the existing electrical panel that wasn't done correctly by the electrical engineer. So they have insurance as contractors. Let's hold them accountable. And let's have them eat the costs, not on taxpayers' backs or the backs of students. When it comes to the music insurance renewal, which is our self-insurance fund with a cooperative with other school districts run by the state, you know, we're looking at a 43% increase. So we've had a lot of liabilities and a lot of claims evidently. It's $1,454,000 increase this year. To bring that close to $5 million is what our cost share is. And I ask that we go out to bid to the private sector. North Middle School abatement program, asbestos materials on Wing 5, $534,000. Why was this not in the initial scope, bid, and the contract? When it comes to the buying of the buses, I want to remind you, the state legislature has approved for the last 2 years, 100% funding reimbursement to our district. The bus wage proposal for a 3-year schedule for this year, $23. Is that really enough to pay our bus drivers? And finally, I asked that the $426,000 contract for HVAC, that we hire 2 people and cut the cost to $225,000 rather than the bid for $436,000.
Time's up.
Thank you. You can be a little bit more considerate and respectful.
Ditto. Consent agenda.
Motion.
Thank you. Mr. Pratt, second. Mr. Helms, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Financial reports, please.
All right. I think you're gonna get tired of me tonight, because it's just one more I have to say. I'll try not to say too much. I'm gonna say when we talk about the budget. The end of November, that is our lowest point as far as fund balances go for the year, because we start to receive our property taxes this month in December. If you'll notice, we were down to 38 million roughly in operating reserves. We finished the year closer to 77 million. If I were to pull it today, I think we were closer to 52, because we've already started to get some of those property tax payments. So at our lowest point, we're 14%. That's great, because there's plenty of districts that at their lowest point, they're at zero and they're borrowing. That costs money. We never want to be in that position. Fund balances in total, when you include the bond funds, were 77 million. And just like last month, we actually had more invested than we show on cash on our books, and that's just the gap between checks cashing and, you know, like, we put them in the books, so we've written a check, we lower the books right away, they just take some time to go out, they have to be board approved, and then we have to mail them out in cash. So that's why there's always a little bit of surplus over how much we're investing versus what we show as our fund balance at this time of year. Revenue and expenditures, they are in line with where we want them to be this type of year. When we get to the budget, I'll definitely be talking about some of those changes that we do have and the areas of concern within the revenues and expenditures. Do you have any questions?
Any questions? All right, I need a motion to approve the financial reports as presented. Mr. Christopher, second. Mr. Helms, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. New business. Dr. Myers?
Thank you very much. As Brian said, we were going to hear a lot from Ryan tonight. So first item under new business is the 2024-25 budget revision. As you all know, this is the standard time of year where we come back mid-year, kind of see where we're at, any unexpected expenditures, issues that we're looking at, changes in revenue. And so Brian's going to go over those changes for us and go from there.
All right, so hopefully everybody got their budget book. It's similar to last year. There's a few changes, but I'll get into them. I think the big news is that very first page, we have a table of essentially what we're asking for tonight, what's going to change. Some of these items are completely out of our control. The single largest is music, there's also that music board item, it's gone up 42%. It's unfortunate. It's not just our claims, it's statewide. We're not the only district with a 40% increase. Some districts had, 25, 26%, but they also didn't have a huge hailstorm with millions of dollars of damage. I think that's a big part of it. Talking to music, I believe the last few years, they haven't really raised rates when they should have, because they just kept hoping it was turning around. And I have my own theory on insurance, it only goes in one direction. So you have to raise the premiums once you start to see those numbers go down. Our second biggest change is just a reduction in basic formula revenues. I hinted at that a while ago when you could see it was coming in less. The big change is when we were budgeting basic formula revenues, there was a few unknown items. We knew the state was going to change how they were calculating the weighted ADA. We didn't know by how much. Our weighted average daily attendance dropped by 1,000 compared to last year. Fortunately, that was offset by the state giving more money per weighted ADA, about $350 per student. So that's a net increase of $1 million. Going into next year, they're actually raising that state adequacy target per weighted ADA even more. And fortunately, the state has provided more projections for future years, so we kind of know close to what our weighted ADA will be next year. Our attendance percentage this year will play into it, but looking, this year it's a 1 million decrease, but one of our biggest gains next year will be in that basic formula target, because the state's giving about $400 more per student, and that'll be worth about $5 million to us next year. So there's some good news with that. The next are salaries and related benefits. Looking at our salaries today, we were able to cut $1.25 million, and when you cut salaries, there's also the related retirement, Medicare taxes down too, so that's another 220. So right there, we had that basic formula, or the way I look at it is the salaries and the benefits, they were just completely offset by the music increase. Projected supply savings, just looking historically, we finished roughly $1 million to $2 million under what we budget for supplies. I've noticed that anywhere I go, it's one of the hardest things to forecast, because part of it is you're trying to guess what something will cost, and then we go through the bidding process, and hopefully it's cheaper. So I took that number 750. It could change. I might come here in the spring, and I might say to you guys, when I cut that 750, I shouldn't have. But as of today, we felt good cutting it. Another one that we've talked about in the past is the investment earnings, $500,000 drop, just solely from that Fed funds rate dropping. And again, I could come to you and ask for an even bigger decrease in that in the spring, because we'll have a much better idea then. And then finally, property taxes increased slightly. So I just put that in there. It was $250,000. That's a lot for a dollar amount, but it's less than 1% of our total, it's less than 1/10 of 1% of our total budget. So those numbers are big, but as a percent of our budget, all of those changes added up to about $1 million reduction, and we're still showing a surplus in our operating funds, which is where we want to be. You can ask Henry and Paul, when I started to see these negative things happen, it was like, oh, look at this basic formula. Oh, look at this music. I was really worried that we weren't going to have a surplus, because you look at it, you put your revenues together, then you put your expense together, and then you combine them. And fortunately, when we combined them, there was still a small surplus. Besides just those were the operating funds, the other big change was with our capital projects fund. We just, during budgeting, again, similar issue, some of the leases that were entered into last year weren't properly put into the budget, so we were about $400,000 under our capital projects budget there. Putting them in there, that's going to raise our expenses. There was also a need for $115,000 in kitchen equipment at North Middle that we had to add in there. And property taxes were going to increase a little bit as well. And the other change is there's a form of revenue called in lieu of tax. That's, if there's a TIF, a Chapter 150, it's what they pay in lieu of property taxes. Historically, we've put that in our debt service fund. After talking to Stiefel, there's no reason for it to go in our debt service fund, because that's well funded. That revenue is much better served in our capital projects fund, so that would be a transfer of when we budget $180,000 that was in the debt service will now be in the capital projects. That's, a bus we could buy. It's just a lot more useful in our capital projects than it is in our debt service fund. And then as far as what we changed on the reports, if you look, let's say go into that fund balance section, we put some future forecasting in there. For the operating, the reason why we do this, if we don't change anything, what do our balances look like? They look really good next year because of that basic formula. You start to get 4 years out, you'll see a negative number there as the end. I assure you, we will do something for that negative number. We're not just gonna let it sit, but, you know, budgets change, they're movable. You know, if we had done this last year at this time, we certainly wouldn't have had the music change in our forecast, but we also wouldn't have had that big bump from our basic formula in there as well. So it's just forward looking to say, hey, are we in a good shape? We wouldn't want to bring you a budget that, yeah, it works today, but in 2 years, you know, there's a big $10 million deficit. So that's why we added the forward forecasting to the budget this year. And then most of the other reports are, you know, because there wasn't really that many changes, they're very similar to what you approved in the summer. So, do you have any question on our budget changes or the report itself?
Just a couple of things to add to what Brian's sharing. He went through it briefly, but that future forecasting is something new that Brian has put together, and I know he just referenced it. But for the board and for the community, I think that is a very valuable tool, because it's that predictive look of, barring these unforeseen things, where are we from a health standpoint, not in the immediate year, but in the next several. So I wanted to point that out, that I appreciate Brian taking the time to do that. And that is something in sharing information with you all, he's trying to be a little more assertive about showing where we're at now and where there may be issues down the road or not. The only other comment that I would add to this is music, in the insurance increase that we went through, it is not only the result of this catastrophic hailstorm that happened last spring. They have had 2 years consecutively of excessive claims. And so in talking to them and walking through this, year prior, they reset their benchmark on that kind of claim level that they were anticipating. And then on top of that, we had that huge storm and it far surpassed. So they went up already to compensate, and it came right over the top on that for 2 years in a row. So what you hope happens is you get through a cycle where you don't have that level of claims, and then they adjust it back down, which has happened for us in the district. That's the benefit of a cooperative. It would be tricky for us to go out and bid that kind of coverage. You can do it, but in terms of like your dollar amount that you're looking at, you'd have to see. I'd be shocked if they could come back and beat music.
I was just, because when we got the quote, that was my first thing to, like, oh, I can't go to the board with a 42% increase without at least looking. I got a laugh from somebody I know pretty well that would have, you know, if he could have gotten the business, he would have done it. And he just saw our rates and he goes, yeah, that's probably what the market's going to give you regardless. And there just wasn't enough time to get a new quote, so.
Yeah. So, you know, anecdotally, just in talking about the budget revision, I think ending up with a surplus despite taking that huge hit is a positive, but we prefer to not have future hits in that ballpark going into the spring. So, sorry to interrupt with questions, but anybody jump in?
Yeah, I did have one question. The money you said it was $180,000 you moved from the debt service fund into a separate fund, right? Is there any chance that we'll need that money in the debt service fund at all?
No, our debt service is well-funded, so we are, you know, I'm gonna assume at some point we're gonna go back and ask the public, you know, that, but we have enough money even with that, because that's when we ran the projections with Stifel. I ran my own independent, and then Lorenzo ran his own, and we came down to almost the exact same number, so both felt very comfortable. And it was just more, I was used to that, I'm like, oh, you put something in the debt service, you can't touch it.
Right.
Put something in capital projects, you could maybe buy, oh, we need some kitchen equipment, you know, whatever, some of those emergency purchases that come up during a year, it's a good source for it.
I like it. I just didn't want to put us in a situation where we do like, oh, we're fine. And all of a sudden it's like, oh no, we didn't think about this, and we have to find 180 to put back in there. And it's a little bit harder to put back in there today.
Yeah, we're very fortunate to have a very good property tax. Debt service is 65, 66 cents, and that stays the same even when the AV goes up, unlike the rest of our rates. So that's where we've been so fortunate, is our AV's gone up. If it had been 6 years ago, it wouldn't have been time to move it, because our AV was lower.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? All right, if not, I need a motion to approve the 24-25 budget revisions as presented. Mr. Helms, second. Ms. Byrd, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you.
Next item, no shocker, is the 2025 music insurance renewal recommendation. We've probably covered this ground a fair amount already, but Brian, anything you want to add in terms of sharing with the board?
I think the only thing I would add is that we're asking to add back umbrella coverage this year. We don't have the exact dollar amount, so I wrote the board item with its parameters. It's roughly a 4 to 5 million more in our umbrella for roughly 100,000. If the parameters of that change, if I come back and they say, oh, it's 200,000 for 4 million, we would come back and ask before we pay it. But I do ask that if it's within that $100,000 range for 4 to 5 million in additional coverage, we get it. There always used to be the case, probably half the districts have it, that you don't really need it, but now any individual claim can be so large that we do need that umbrella coverage. It's just the nature of the world we're in.
Any questions? All right, I need a motion to approve the 2025 music insurance renewal as presented. Mr. Helms, second. Mr. Christopher, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you.
Next item is the 2025-2026 bus driver pay plan. For benefit of the board and the community, we are coming off the end this current year of a 3-year salary schedule that we had set for our bus drivers, and looked at how do we kind of stay competitive in that market, but also we continue, like almost every other district in the state of Missouri, to work on shortages. And we're at a place where, on a pay perspective, we're competitive, but you know that those are going to continue to escalate. So Aaron Williams, our executive director, is here to kind of go over the pay plan particulars themselves. One of the things that I do want to point out in considering this is we're trying to accomplish 2 things. One is the majority of our drivers fall on the higher end of our pay schedule. And so we want to make sure for that category we stay competitive, keep the people we have, and keep ahead of where we're at in the county and the region. But we have a pretty limited pool that are in our very early steps. And so trying to get a little more competitive on that starting rate, we're at $19.25 now, and getting that up to a competitive rate, and then accelerating those people more quickly so they realize those pay increases. That's kind of the philosophy that we've landed on here, with a 1-year set to kind of also allow us in the fall, when we come back and start looking at future budget and other groups, to know that we're all kind of starting from the same place. So Aaron, with that in mind, anything you want to jump into and explain where we're at?
No, thank you. Good evening. So like Dr. Meyer said, we put this pay plan together in order to stay competitive, entry level, and for top level to attract experienced drivers. So we think the plan that you have in front of you would accomplish that, starting at $23 an hour. After reviewing all of the area districts that we're, competitive with for other drivers, that would put us right at even with the top districts. And then our top line at $29 an hour would be the top in the area. So we think that's a good thing for attracting experienced drivers, but also that quick progression we believe would have a positive impact on retention of our drivers. So as presented, the plan that you have in front of you would be a total cost of about right under $220,000 for our current staff members. But like Dr. Meyer said, we're running at about 13 drivers short daily, and then we have 10 of those 10 additional contracted through Axle services. So anytime that we can bring our services in-house with our own employees, we know we're always going to get the best. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, but I appreciate your consideration.
Any questions?
I was going to ask, okay, so the current steps, I'm assuming that's years of service?
Correct.
And so
How would we
what
consolidate
happens
that?
after D?
then for the proposed step?
Well, right now, that's just a one-year plan. So we would relook at that next year, but it could be something that we either top folks out at or, do a percentage increase. That would be something that we would look at next year. But the way that the schedule is set right now, folks within so many years are gonna funnel into plan, or, step A, 3 to 5 years, I believe, is step B, and go on like that, which is what we did when we passed our pay plan 3 years ago.
And then for the years of service, is that only in our district or is that years driving total?
Yeah, no, so, good question. We honor all years of experience as long as those years of experience are within, the last 10 years. So if somebody drove 40 years ago, a lot has changed. So we're not gonna credit for those experiences. But if, they were, a bus driver previously and then, changed careers and wanted to come back to that, then we would honor those years. So those are all laid out in our handbook.
Awesome. And then lastly, does this mean everyone will get an increase?
Correct,
Okay.
yes,
Thank you.
everyone will get an increase, yeah. Good question.
Any other questions? All right, do I need
Thank
a
you.
motion to approve the 25-26. Ms. Byrd, second, Mr. Helms, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you.
Next item is the HVAC service and maintenance recommendation. Lisa Kester, the birthday girl, is going to walk us through that. So happy birthday, Lisa.
Thank you, Dr. Myers.
Take it away from there.
Thank you, Dr. Myers. You threw me off by saying that. In your board packet, there is a memo from me to Dr. Myers. We had to put out our HVAC service and maintenance agreement that we have with IFS. We had it for we did it 5 years ago, so it was up. And we got 3 bids submitted, and IFS was the low bidder again this year. And it is for a 3-year contract with the district has the right then to negotiate 2 additional years in 1-year increments. The contract did increase 6%, but just to let you know, they'll hold that price then for 3 years, which they have to account for their labor that they are anticipating getting in the next 3 years, those labor increases. I can't say enough about IFS. They do a great job for the district. They're here all the time for us, and we can count on them. So, and they've been in our district for 25 years. So I just like to recommend them to move forward with another 3 years.
Any questions? All right, I need a motion to approve the 25-27 HVAC service contract. Mr. Christopher, second. Ms. Byrd, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Next item, staying with Lisa, is the abatement quote for North Middle School. This is specific to the multi-story addition that we'll be taking down, so the work has to be accomplished in advance of that. Just for good public record, this was costs that were anticipated and included in our scale and scope of this project, so these are not additional costs. There is also some benefit for breaking out this type of bid separately, given the nature of it and upcharging that can happen when included in other combined bids. So Lisa, with that being said, you want to walk us through the bid?
Sure, thank you, Dr. Myers. As Dr. Myers said, we're going to be demolishing the 2-story wing and a portion of the single story, and it was built in 1959, so it contains asbestos. We have to, by law, identify that and let the department know, and then we have to have it abated before we can tear it down. It's going to be a long, probably 8 to 10 week process. We're thinking to abate it. I had got a quote from Universal Abatement. I don't know if you remember, but several months ago when we started this project, we knew we were going to run into individual little areas that had to be abated for the contractor, and I got some unit pricing, and we did get 2 bids on that, and Universal Abatement was the lowest bidder at that time. And so I went back to them for this larger project since they were the lowest bidder at that time, and went through purchasing Missouri Buys co-op, which I've talked to Brian, and that's a really good co-op for the school districts to use, and they're a member of that. So we got it's vetted, it meets all the bidding requirements. It saves us the time and the money of putting it out to bid, and it keeps our project moving along. So their cost for this is $534,126. I did mention in my memo that we do have to do some additional demolition, and I'm working with the general contractor to get some costs for that. The abatement contractor just can't handle it in their scope of work, and we need to take care of that. Now, I or Toby will be bringing that to the board as we get those costs. So I'm just asking for approval to move forward with universal abatement for the $534,126.
I need a motion to approve the North Middle School abatement quote. Mr. Helms, second. Ms. Byrd, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
And the last item, Jeremy Moore has the 2024 policy updates. As always, these are policies unless otherwise required that would go into effect for the next calendar year. So as we roll into 25, 26, which sounds strange saying that, but Jeremy, anything you want to walk us through?
Yeah, this really is just, as I noted a couple board meetings ago, and thank you, Dr. Myers, really what we're seeing, and they just released another batch within the last probably month or so. A lot of these are, they're updates, probably 22, 23. So when I sent this out to you, it's kind of a wide variety. You've got some A+ scholarship updates. This one in particular went through the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. That kind of bleeds into several different policies that we just have to make sure that we are updating within there. There's some information with Foster Act, so it kind of bounces around. I think what we're gonna see, even as I was looking at the one that's sitting in the queue that we'll bring to you after the first of the year, it really is MSBA kind of catching up still. And as the cycle legislation goes through, they're just trying to stay up with it. So nothing in this one in particular that was anything other than just kind of going along with the statutory state level and federal level updates. So if there's any questions, I know I had some that had reached out previously, but any questions I can answer, I certainly will do so.
Questions? All right, I need a motion to approve the policy updates as presented. Mr. Christopher, second. Mr. Pratt, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All right, lastly, we have the comments from the board. Mr. Pratt, would you like to start?
Sure, a few things to let the public know about. Number one, over at South High School, when they're not winning state championships, they're building future teachers for Fort Zumwalt. We have 2 new additions that'll be joining Zumwalt in the future. We've got 2 seniors, Kellyanne Flaherty and Aiden Voigt. Kellyanne's going to be studying secondary math. Aiden's going to study special education, so we wish them the best with their education. Can't wait to get them back here. Next, just want to say Merry Christmas, everybody. Hope you have a great, safe holiday.
Ms. Bird?
Thank you. I wanted to start off talking about South again. South High diver Joel Estol, forgive me, I hope I pronounced that correctly, finished second in GAC diving and broke the school record for an 11 dive meet. I also wanted to say thank you all for all the work that you put into all of that and answering our many questions. I hope everyone has a wonderful winter holiday and best of luck in the new year.
Mr. Christopher?
Yeah, I'd like to give a shout out. We had 2 teachers that were named recipients of the Emerson Excellence in Teaching Award. It's a super award. It's Jennifer Kiss from Hope High School, English Language Arts, and, Jennifer Kiss, Early Childhood Special Education, and then Jason Rubin, Special Language Arts teacher. Only 100 educators are honored each year with this, so it's quite the award. Jennifer's in her 28th year teaching, and Jason's in his 25th year teaching. So it's always good to see teachers, more mature teachers, setting examples for the other ones, and this is 2 really good examples of that. Also, as always, thanks for all your hard work, teachers, always knocking it out of the park. Lisa, happy birthday. And have a great holiday.
Thank you. Mr. Holmes?
All right, well, back to South High again. So, I should give a shout out to the South High girls golf team. They finished 4th in the state this year, and that's actually the best team finish in school history. So, shout out to them for that. That's big. Next thing I'm gonna go over is I want to talk about the U.S. News and World Report. Fort Zumwalt Elementary and Middle Schools have again been recognized as among the best in the state by U.S. News and World Report. The organization ranked almost 1,500 Missouri middle schools, and 4 Fort Zumwalt middle schools were in the top 4%. And also out of the 1,800 Missouri elementary schools that were ranked, Fort Zumwalt Elementary Schools ranked in the top 26%. So again, thank you teachers, thank you administration, thank you fellow board members. It's all a team, and thank you to the community, because it's all a team effort from everybody. Parents, uncles, aunts, grandparents, all of the above. So thank you for making Fort Zumwalt so great. Have a Merry Christmas. Hopefully everybody still has some money left in 2025. Yeah, you know, I appreciate being here, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you. I got one thing. We had our annual apprenticeship night. We had almost 200 students and family members to attend, which is awesome because it keeps growing. We had 24 new students sign up onto work with one of our 20 business partners. 3 students who completed their 2,000 hours of work, receiving the United States Department of Labor Certified Apprentice Certificate. There's more information on this on our website, for Zumwalt Apprenticeships button when you go on there. So that's awesome. Thank you guys for growing it. Thanks for your work with that, Ms. Wagner, and everybody involved. And to piggyback what everybody else said, Merry Christmas. I hope you guys all have a relaxing break and reset for the new year, because we're gonna finish it awesome. So thank you guys. With that includes our agenda. We will not return to open session. After the closed session, I need a motion to go into closed session in accordance with RMSO 610.021 to discuss the approval of the minutes from our November 18th closed session meeting, hiring, promotion of personnel. Ms. Bird, second please. Mr. Christopher, roll call please, Ms. Marks.
Mrs. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Holmes?
Here, yes.
Mr. Christopher? Mrs. Bird?
Yes.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.